Greetings, this is Griff Ruby, Nostalgic Catholic, with yet another Isaac Asimov short story review. Well, this next story, appearing once again now on the pages of Founding Science Fiction, the June 1951 issue, is a little story. It did not get the cover, but as always, it is listed in the table of contents. And it's a little story called Breathe There a Man by Isaac Asimov. And it's on page 73. So, let's take a brief look at what we have in there. So, what do we have in this drawing? We have that's supposed to be like a whole world. Look closely at this. That's supposed to be like our city buildings as viewed from above. Little tiny cars in there somewhere if you really look carefully. Okay, all under lock and key inside some kind of a safe with a lock or something on it. And a hand doing the writing. Okay, reads there a man, ... question mark. Isaac Asimov, and there's a little blurb. I'll just read the blurb, publisher's blurb, and it says, "It was a very interesting and of course highly improbable theory for a first-rate physicist to come up with, but something not quite human seemed to be causing a bit of trouble." Well, in a nutshell, that is the story, all right. The something not quite human basically sees humanity as some sort of a microbe that has to be kept from spreading anywhere. Like if you had a laboratory and you're trying to grow some sort of germ to observe it, to do whatever with it, you know, you would try to protect that germ, keep it from that germ from escaping. You might surround it, for example, with an increasing gradient of penicillin such that it can't get very far. So you would try to have real serious protections to keep from having it get out. It could be contagious, it could be terrible, and we don't want to have another Wuhan lab leak. So what we have to do is, the thing is, suppose some other creature, alien and a whole lot more powerful than humanity, is doing exactly that. As long as we're just puttering around, even with such things as atomic power, there comes a point where the point in our continuing is done. The experiment is done. And when it's done, we're just a science experiment. We can be killed off. We served our purpose. On to the next experiment. So that would be the reason we're allowed to develop atomic power. So we, especially atomic bombs, so that we can blow ourselves up, and that would be that. Only thing is, we could also stop that. There's a bit of an illustration how primitive weapons call for primitive solutions that would protect from the weapons. You have swords and guns, and you protect them with body armor, shielding, and knights in shining armor and all that, and other kinds of ways of preventing these things. Bulletproof vests. And obviously, if you're going to have an atomic bomb, you need to invent some sort of protection from that. And of course, the idea of missiles capable of intercepting, missiles that have nuclear warheads that are on our way to us, on their way to us, doesn't seem to have occurred to them yet. I mean, now that's fairly well known as a thing, but it wasn't back in 1951 or whenever this was written. So they would talk about that it's like another science fiction trope, really. And probably is fiction, fictitious as faster than light travel or time travel, and that is the force field, this invisible force field, this globe of just energy that somehow you throw something at it and it hits nothing, and yet nothing but thin air. The thin air stops it. An interesting concept, but again, one with no scientific basis. I vaguely recall that there, in fact, in this series, I'm sure I discussed it briefly. In one of the stories, it turned out that you could get a globular force field the same way that if we were two-dimensional, you could make a circular force field around an object by having the energy come from the third dimension in this like cone, this hollow cone of energy that would draw the circle and so forth. So likewise, if you wanted a spherical bubble of protective energy force field around something, you would go off into the fourth dimension and have some sort of 3D cone of this energy come at our space. So, but all of this is, not going to happen. I'm pretty sure. I mean, it could be interesting, I guess, to be wrong on that, but I just don't see that happening. I really don't. So, that being the case, but anyway, this guy named Elwood Ralston, he's a physicist. He's the physicist that's the main person in the story. And he is trying to develop a force field that would be able to protect us from the force of a nuclear bomb. If you just feed it enough power, even a nuclear explosion would just stop by this invisible energy force field. But the problem is that's exactly not what the mysterious alien powers would want. They want us to destroy ourselves since we have served our purpose in whatever experiments. Just as the point came when the dinosaurs had served their purpose, they somehow brought their own destruction upon themselves. Again, this whole business of a meteorite bringing about their destruction not being known yet. So, Ralston is somehow detecting this. As he gets closer and closer to being able to figure out how to do this force field, he starts getting these weird suicidal thoughts. And the closer he gets, the more he wants to kill himself. Because we're not supposed to have that sort of thing. The alien beings don't approve of that. So, let's see how that goes. Because if we can do that, then we can escape. We can escape the little petri dish we all live in called Earth, or called the universe as we know it. So, get out of the locked room here at the beginning. And the guy is trying to escape that by writing down, looks like some sort of math equations or something that might describe machinery that would make a force field. So, let's see how that goes. Now we have some other pieces of artwork associated with that. One of them here, this is our guy. He's intelligent, but at the same time, he's thinking explosions on the one hand, but non-existence on the other. And he's got to try to come up with some way to make something else happen. That's what he wants to do, so humanity can survive and break out of this prison or whatever it is and be free. There's an experiment going on, and they draw it kind of nicely here. They've got some sort of a power station or something, and around it is designed this spherical force field bubble, and it just sits there, and as the bubble gets stronger, it actually gets kind of opaque, and then eventually it turns like a mirror because it also turns aside all radiation. So that's kind of cool. I like the way they describe that, at least. If you had such a thing, and it could in particular defer all radiations, so that things like gamma rays and beta rays and all the X-rays and all the other stuff that comes out of a nuclear explosion won't pass through, along with a physical blast of physical atoms and so forth. Ah, yes, they even have. If you look at the top, there's this little object here, a little ball and a pendulum. They try banging that against it. At first it's kind of squishy and soft and just slows it down. And as they turn up the intensity, it gets harder and harder. And finally you just go ting against it and can't even put a dent in it. So there's that. Then we have another interesting picture here. Here's our guy again. And he is like, you see him as if he's trying to break through some sort of limit. And this can create contagion. Humanity may become contagious and spread throughout the galaxy. So let's see. I think that's that's the last picture. All right. Needless to say, none of those pictures or the blurb, editorial blurb, are in the book into which this story was gathered and published, and that would be Nightfall and Other Stories by Isaac Asimov. So, but everything else seems to be that I did not discern any differences in the text between the original and that. So, Ralston, but nobody, he's trying to explain that this is the problem, but of course, nobody really takes him seriously. There's a sort of psychotherapist who's appointed to watch over him, like a kind of suicide watch, to listen to him, to hear him out, to see if we can figure out what's wrong with the guy. But at the same time, he's trying to be this understanding, sympathetic listener. He tells all these things, and the person, you have to sit there and say, yeah, well, I see the point of that. And all the while in the back of your mind, yeah, right. He's out of it, but you never pretend. Yeah, well, I see. Yeah, that could be true. That's an interesting thought. Who knows? Maybe that's the case. No, not really. It's like. But anyway, the niceness or politeness is taken at face value by Elston Ralston, and who kind of puts up with this person a little more than everybody else, who just, denigrate him, make fun of him, and have nothing to do with him. So they finally persuade him to go ahead and finish coming up with the equations around which some sort of force field to prevent nuclear blasts from destroying us could be developed. And with great difficulty, he manages to do it. And then, while we're trying to go off and test this stuff, somehow he managed to slink off and kill himself. And how does he do that? Well, there's another little part to it, and it's probably part of the same effect that these mysterious aliens are trying to bring about to try to make him kill himself, which in fact, as you see, he does in fact do. And that is that you've got this policeman, because at first it started with him calling the police, kind of asking for a suicide watch. They didn't have those things in those days, but look, I'm going to kill myself. I just know it. If I don't, get some way to get stopped, I need people to stop me. Put me in jail, and that way, without anything sharp or dangerous with which I can hurt myself, because I will kill myself otherwise. And the police are all kind of like, well, I don't know. We're not going to throw you in jail unless you commit a crime, You didn't want to commit a crime just so you put in jail and get a suicide watch. So eventually a policeman is kind of allocated to him to kind of keep an eye on things part-time. And this policeman has this rather curious little habit. He's got this little knife that he just likes to toss around from hand to hand. It just kind of thrills him to play with this thing. You almost expect him to go play mumbledy-peg with it or something, but he doesn't quite do that. But he's got this knife he's playing with. And they said, put that away. We don't want him grabbing that thing. But somehow, towards the end, that policeman looks, his knife is gone. He has somehow managed to take it, go off somewhere into somebody's office at the place where all this is being done, and kill himself. And they managed to build this thing, and it will work. But he cannot survive. He is just too thick in the penicillin to be able to continue living. But he forced himself to stay alive just long enough to write out all the equations and diagrams and whatever it took to be able to design the equipment that would do this. So, breathe there a man. Could there be someone immune to this, or if not immune, or maybe we're all immune, and too bad those of us who are immune weren't also smart enough to come up with this thing. Or maybe it's a matter of whoever's smart enough will not be immune, or if they were, that would be a highly exceptional person. So it's kind of curious thought, and it turns out he's not the only suicide, but I have to leave some spoilers out so that we still have a story. Anyway, it's the next story, and thank you all for listening.